Okay, good Erev Shabbos, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us on this Leil Shishi, going into Erev Shabbos Kodesh for the learning of Torah in Elul, to be Mekayim the mitzvah v'dibar tabam la'aseh nachas ruach liyotzreinu. One of the wonderful things to do in Elul is we know Kutsha Barichu v'Raisa Chadhu. The Torah and Hashem is one. So it says, Ani l'dodi, I am to my beloved. One of the ways to get to be beloved is to learn Torah. And so we have in mind in this Elul to do the right thing. And we welcome back Eddie Chazan back to the fold. And we heard the news that he's going to Eretz Yisrael to see his family, and it's one of the hard things to part with such a wonderful Talmud. But we are happy for him that he's going to see his family. He waits, until he strikes it, and then he goes. Listen, my best friend Yitzi Kurtzer was on that plane that was diverted to Bulgaria. What happened was the pilot by accident hit the hijack button, and all of a sudden 2 jets came out, 2 fighter jets. They didn't let him land. He went to Cyprus. They didn't let him land in Cyprus. They ended up landing in Bulgaria. My friend who went for a bris of an anikel almost missed the bris. Yeah, I believe that. Okay. So we are holding. We'll start from 3 lines from the bottom of Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. Let's just make sure I got. You see, I said I make sure I got everything working, and I didn't have the digital recorder on. Irving was always there to remind me. Where's the digital recorder? Where's Irving? Wow, Irving is not here. And I have a feeling Irving is in Florida. Yeah, he's in Florida. So, Florida sometimes, if you want to go and eat somewhere, everything closes early. So it's. Okay. So now, Amar Chizkiah Mishum Abaya. Chizkiah says in the name of Abaya, Hilchasa, the bottom line, Dogim she'alu b'kara, fish that you put on a hot fleishicha plate, mutar la'ochlan b'kutach. You could eat it with milchika mayonnaise, because that's not banat. The plate is nice and tam, and then the fish is nice and tam, and it's like Shmuel says, not banat is mutar. But radish, remember radish is sharp. Radish that you cut with a knife, that you cut meat, and therefore since the radish is sharp, it absorbed the meat from the knife. Also that you can't eat, that radish you can't eat with the milk of mayonnaise. Mayonnaise, one of its main ingredients is whey of milk. V'hani milit snain, but that's only true with radish. The agav churfei bola, because of its sharpness, it absorbs the taste of the meat. Aval kishas, but a cucumber, gur lebei paske. All you have to do is shave off the place where you cut. V'achel kilchei delifta, turnip stalks, which has sweetness, Shari. The turnip stalks that you cut with the meat, you're allowed to eat that with the kutach, because the sweetness of the turnip, I always tell my wife, the turnips are a very big part of the taste of a soup. Here we have, the Gemara tells us, the turnip has its own unique taste. So, shari. The silka asire. Now this is very interesting. But if you cut with the meat beets have its own sharpness. Now it's very interesting that there's a big machlokes how to translate silka. Throughout Shas, I've always translated silka as beets. The Gemara tells us beets is a very healthy food. In Masechtas Brachos, it tells us that beets are very good with the heart. And you know, the nutritionists say that red goes for red. And the beets which are red, it's good for the heart, it's good for the blood. But it's very interesting that you know that when we buy those, not everybody buys it, some people do the work themselves. But today, just like most people buy ready-made Hanukkah wicks, nobody makes their own wicks anymore. Right? They buy the oil with the wicks inserted already. So people buy simonim sets. One of the simonim that we eat Rosh Hashanah, which is right around the corner, is silka. We say, Yiratzim u'fanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Aviseinu, sheyistolku seineinu, that our enemies should be removed. In those Rosh Hashanah kits, they don't put beets. They put spinach. There's an opinion that silka is spinach. You know, that takes Marshall back to Popeye. Right? The Lamaisa is, it doesn't really fit over here. Spinach doesn't have a sharpness. You know, beets, I don't know how much of a sharpness it has either. But, Shush, beets have a sharpness? Beets have a sharpness?
Sharp?
Yeah.
That's why a little sour taste.
What?
That's a little sour taste.
Yeah, so anyway, that's what the Gemara says over here. Silka asire. Well, the Gemara says it does. It could be a different variety of beets.
Yeah. I just ate things yesterday. It was raw, it was super soft.
V'i pasich behu, the lifter, if you alternate cutting a turnip and then a beet, then shaperdami, because the turnip already drew out the taste of the meat. Boi minei Rav Dimi mirav Nachman. Maul anuche kada de milcha gabe kada de kimcha. Can you leave an open jar of salt next to an open jar of milcha mayonnaise? We're afraid that some of the mayonnaise might pour in the salt and then you'll use it with fleishes. Amalei aser, it's not allowed. Dechalamai, what about if you have an open thing of milcha mayonnaise next to a thing of vinegar? Amalei shari, that's permitted. Umaishna, so you ask the Rebbe, what's the difference? So here the Rebbe uses a phrase that we have in Shas. The Rebbe tells him, L'chi teichel ala kura de milcha. I'll tell you, when you measure out for me a kur of salt, now a kur of salt is a lot of salt, that's 30 saw of salt. Now what does this phrase mean? It means that if you have to pay for something, you appreciate it more. They used to say that if people would have to pay for a shear, they would appreciate it more, except that they wouldn't come. But if people come to pay to see you, Marshall, But anyway, but he said, if you do a service, I'll tell you, I want you to appreciate the answer. I want you to appreciate the Torah. My timer, what's the reason? Hai isei isura be'enei. Because when the mayonnaise goes into the salt, it stays as a separate entity of Isser. V'hai lese isura be'enei. But when the kimcha, the mayonnaise goes into the vinegar, it disintegrates and it's neutralized. Now this is something that happened to Marshall a few weeks ago. Hahu bar gozola denafel lekada de kimcha. A pigeon fell into a vat of milchika mayonnaise. Anyway, so what do you do with that pigeon? Shaya Rav Chinna Brei Rava me Pashrunya. Rav Chinna, the son of Rava from Pashrunya, permitted it. Rinse it off and it's permitted. Now the problem is that one of the ingredients of the mayonnaise is salt. And we said salt, harihu kareiseach. So Amar Rava, so Rava said, Man chokim lemishrei ki gavna. Who is wise to permit this? Ilav Rav Chinna Brei Rava me Pashrunya. Why? Because kasavar ki amar shmuel maliach harihu kareiseach, that salting it is like you're boiling it. That's when it's so heavily salted that you can't eat it because of the salting, right? They heavily salted it for preservation. They didn't have refrigeration or to purge the blood. But the mayonnaise, it has salt to taste. And therefore it's okay. Just rinse it off and it's okay. But that's only a raw pigeon. But if it's roasted, the roasting softens it, and therefore, boy klipa, you have to peel away the outer layer of the pigeon. The irspe pile, if it has cracks, so then the mayonnaise got into the interior, then kule aser, then it's all aser. V'i misval betavlin, likewise if it was seasoned, so it becomes soft and it goes into the interior, kule aser, it's all aser. No, the pigeon. Yeah, the kutach doesn't absorb anything.
So we're okay.
Now, Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Kiker shechatach aleha basar. A loaf of bread that you cut meat on it. Now when you cut meat, the cutting, the duchka, the sakina, the pressure of the knife presses out blood from the meat. And it oozes on the bread. So asalachli, you're not allowed to eat that bread because it has blood. V'hani mili the asmik, but that's only if you saw that the meat was red. So it had like a bloodish hue. V'hani mili the avre, and it's only if the liquid penetrated through and through the bread. V'hani mili the asmache, and that's only if the liquid that came out was thick. Aval klishta, but if it was thin, less lanbad, there's no problem. Shmuel, he was more machmer. He said if you cut meat over bread and the red comes out, shadi lay the kalva. He would throw the bread to his dog. Rav Huna Yov Leila Shamay. Rav Huna would give it to his attendant, a Yiddish attendant. So the Gemara says, what? He wouldn't eat it himself, but he gives it to his attendant? Manav Shach, if it's permitted, l'kulei alma shari, it should be permitted to everyone. I aser, l'kulei alma aser. Says the Gemara, no, he held it was mutter. But he was fastidious. Anything red, bloodish, he didn't have. Shani Rav Huna danina daite. I mean, Marshall eats meat, extra rare. It looks like, he's a cannibal. But other people can't do that. Rava achale, Rava would eat it. Vikarele chamar basar, the wine of meat. Now here we're going to talk again about the beiduge, the schmaltz pan. You know, Marshall loves schmaltz. So the schmaltz pan. So, says the Gemara, let's talk about the schmaltz pan. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Ein manichin keli tachas basar. You can't put a schmaltz pan underneath the meat when it's roasting. Yichle kol mara admume shabai, until it loses all its reddish appearance. Says, how do you know when it loses its reddish appearance? Miyot mino yadinan, ma'azutu mishmeidra papa ama mishitale timrasai. Once it starts to smoke, that means it dried up and there's no blood. So the Gemara says maybe the bottom is smoking. The bottom dried up, but the top still has blood. Maybe the bottom already is purged of the blood, but ilah loy mata, the upper part isn't, and it's still going to go into the beiduge. It's still going to pollute the schmaltz pan. So therefore, Rav Ashi comes to Marshall's rescue. Rav Ashi, who was the editor of Shas, knew that Marshall is going to be a schmaltz man, and Rabbi Kranz, you weren't around, but we created a new word. We added it to Webster's. Marshall is a schmaltologist. So El Amar Rav Ashi, Leslie Takanta, there's no eitzah to this collection pan. Elamishte beitarte gilei milcha. Throw in 2 big balls of salt, and the balls of salt will absorb the blood and pull it to the bottom, and then you could scoop off the fat from the top. Now, actually, we had a Gemara, I don't know why it's not mentioned. We had a Gemara earlier that said that the blood is different because the blood sinks to the bottom. Remember, we said from the liver it floats to the top, but the blood sinks to the bottom. So the blood sinks to the bottom, what's the problem? Then you skim off the fat. I think that Gemara was assuming that you put in the balls of salt, as the Gemara says over here. Amar Rav Ashi Lesle Takanta Elamishte Beitarte Galilei Milcha. You put in the 2 balls of salt. I'm going to warn Mark, when you turn the page, you're going to get a shock, because Mark hates small dafim. I know, Mark, but what could I do? Umeshafya, and then you scoop off the fat from the top. And since we turned the page already, I could start welcoming in all the wonderful people that are here. As we welcome in Dr. Guy and Leiby Vego and A.B. Spry, it's good to have you back. Saba and Ruben Shannet, who's holding the lone holdout of the fort in the shul, and Yaakov Warman, Eddie Chazan, Berish Gessim, who's watching from a chasana, Yisrael Fisher, Chaim Kramer, Marshall Castle, Dr. Block, Itzi Fuchs, Ruben Pollack, Mark Frankel, Rabbi Kranz, Harvey, Avram Rezepkowitz, Mo Kushner, looking good, Elia Yaffe, Mel Zachter, Rabbi Kaniel, Michal Avram Chavin, Stephen Holtzman, Gedalia Enger, Shelley Zeitman, Nachman Chapler, Yitzi Muller, Ilya Shutman, Shimon Klein, Richard Rosenzweig, Danny Vogel, and David Helfgott. So what do we have over here? We have over here a healthy 34 people, 34 Zoomers, 35 Zoomers, because Ilya Shutman, Jay Siegel just came in. Jay Siegel. Jay, we just turned the page. Top line of Kuf Yud Beis Amid Beis. Top line of Kuf Yud Beis Amid Beis. Amalei Rav Acha Berei de Rav Ika Rav Ashi. Umi Amar Shmuel Achi. The Shmuel say that once the blood drained out, you're allowed to put a vessel underneath. V'amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, we welcome my children are here, David and Devorah, with all my grandchildren. Come on in. You're more than welcome. A royal welcome. Says, Yosef, you could come around and say hello to Saba. Saba will be happy to see you. So you have to see yourself. Come closer to me. There he is. There's Yosef. Yeah, Yosef HaTzadik. Anyway.
That means we're close to 40 now, right?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Says the Gemara, Umi Amar Shmuel Achi. Did Shmuel say this? Aiva Amar Shmuel Kikar Shechatach Aleh Basar. This is after it's finished roasted. When you cut the meat, Asalachli, you can't eat the bread. So you see that there's still blood there. Says the Gemara, Shani Hasam Da'agav Duchat Sakina. Through the pressure of the knife, it exudes extra blood. Now, what happens if you salt, and here we're talking about the heavy salting, which is Kareiseyah. Amar Rav Nachman, Dogim v'oifoi shemolchim zemzeh, fish and birds, fish and poultry. And here the Gemara was not worried about what we're worried so much these days. We're worried so much of the sakana of fish. Perhaps that's only by meat. This is poultry. So dagim va'oifei shemolchim zemzeh, fish and chicken that you salted together, asurin, because the blood comes out of the bird and enters the fish. Says the Gemara, well, one second. Was this a perforated keli or a non-perforated keli? If it's non-perforated, so there's nowhere for the blood to run off, then why? Even one bird with another bird, it's going to be aser because it's going to absorb the blood. As soon as it finishes being pilate, it's going to absorb the blood sitting in the keli, and it's going to be aser. Keli menukav, and if it's a perforated keli, so the blood has where to run off, then afilu dagim v'oifus nami shari. Even fish and birds should also be permitted. Says the Gemara, la'ilam b'keli menukav. It's a perforated keli. However, the fish is soft. V'dagim mishum derafu karmayu, because their skin is very soft. Kadmei upolte, it finishes giving off its blood very quickly. V'oifus kmite, the bird on the other hand is tight. And basar denechi dagim, after the fish finishes secreting its blood, plite oifus v'hader bali minei, the bird still secretes its blood, and before it gets out through the holes, the fish absorbs it and becomes awesome. Now, here's an interesting thing. Ramori barachel imlich le basar shchuta bahade basar treif. Ramori barachel salted shechted meat, which was already purged of its blood, together with basar treifa. This is a basar that is forbidden because it had a perforated membrane of the brain. So also the Kami de Rava came before Rava. Amalei, he said to him, well, the juice of the basar treifa is aser. The juice is aser. Amalei, it says in the pasuk hatmehim, that which is tameh, and we learn out from hatmehim the hay is extra. And since the hay is extra, lesser tsiron, to aser its juice, v'rotvan, its gravy, v'kipa shalem, and its sediment. So the Gemara says, I don't know, why do we need a special pasuk? Salting is like roasting, and pickling is like cooking it. So just like salting gets out the blood, so over here salting will get out the treifa. So what's the chiddush? Says Gemara, the chiddush is that I might think that the juice of a treifa is just zeya ba'alma. It's just mere sweat. That's only blood. The juice and the gravy, I might think it's just zeya ba'alma, and it's not forbidden. Like Kamash Malan from the extra hayav tameim, that the juice is also aser, and it asers the meat that it's salted with. Okay, so now Rabbi say the next stop tonight is also a triple crown. The next stop that we do is we're going to have for the Shabbos table.